In this video seminar, I'm going to be talking about Act 2 of A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen. I'm going to be analysing some key quotes for the purposes of boosting your AO2, which is a comment on dramatic methods. This video is aimed at students that are studying the play as part of their A-level. So the aim of this video is very simple. It's to take a selection of key passages from Act 2 and be able to analyse them in terms of what makes them significant, how the quotes could be interpreted. And just a reminder that if you are studying this play and the play will be with you in the exam, that gives you the opportunity to zoom into particular moments of the play in order to perhaps look at the language in a closer detail than if the exam was a closed book. So this is an open book exam, I'm assuming, and therefore you will have all of this in front of you in that exam to quote from. Remember that this is a play in translation, so with each publisher, the translation will be slightly different. So the plot will be the same, of course, but the language will be slightly different. For this video and for my students, we use the Black Penguin edition, which is seen here on the right. So the wording from this video will be taken from that book, but depending on the book that you're using for your course, just bear in mind that the wording might be slightly different. It sometimes helps that when students, of course, in the class have the same version, but it also helps if they have the same version in class that they will have in the actual exam. So let's dive in to Act 2. And I'm going to start by talking about the end, actually, of the act, kind of, I suppose, middle to end of the act, and that is when we have this business with Halmer wanting to post his letter, and that letter is a symbol of truth, and it's in that letter, of course, that Halmer has said to Krogstad, "You're fired." Halmer cannot bear the thought of working with a morally bankrupt person like Krogstad in his bank, and therefore Halmer has sacked him. Halmer, of course, also doesn't like the fact that Krogstad uses Halmer's first name, Torvald, which Halmer doesn't like because it's too familiar, and he doesn't want to associate himself with that kind of person. So the letter is effectively dismissing Krogstad from the bank. Of course, that has severe consequences to Nora and Halmer's marriage, because Krogstad, remember, said, "If I lose my job, I'll tell your husband you have committed forgery." And now that that letter has been sent, and in fact he has lost his job, that letter acts as a catalyst, of course, for the disintegration of their marriage, which we see in Act 3. The language that Nora uses, particularly in this middle blue section, is very typical of Nora at this point of the play. She's so on edge and she's so erratic that the sentences here, there's lots of exclamatives, there's lots of kind of caesura, we could say, lots of pauses. It's very kind of irrational. Of course, at this point, she is also contemplating suicide as the only exit out of this mess. So when she says things like, "You don't know what this could mean," it means that he doesn't realise that this letter is not just about sacking somebody at the bank. It also has far-reaching consequences for all of their kind of family harmony in this home. And Krogstad's dismissal, therefore, is, almost like a ticking bomb, which can destroy the harmony of this marriage, represented metaphorically, of course, by this house. To conflict with this kind of erratic language, you have some very short sentences in pink here, very simply saying "too late." And of course, the reason why Halmer is angry here is because Nora has called him petty, and he doesn't like that. And it's worse because Nora, of course, is a woman. So for a wife to call their husband petty is almost the end of the world for Halmer, and he's not having it. So he takes decisive action by posting this letter to get rid of Krogstad. And of course, as an audience, because we know what Nora has done with Krogstad in terms of this loan, it means that suspense and tension begins to build quite kind of consistently in Act 2 until you get to the climax in Act 3, where he reads Krogstad's letter in which he tells Halmer what's actually happened with the loan. So the tension is beginning to build here. Just before that, Dr. Rank and Nora are on stage, And this is an example again of how Nora is capable of rebelling and dissenting from expected behaviours of women at the time, particularly married mothers. So we get the sense here from the tone that there is a degree of flirtation between Dr. Rank and Nora, and that leads Nora to get out her silk stockings. And this is a symbol of sexual rebellion. At the time, the context, Victorian etiquette suggested or dictated that women should not show their leg above the ankle. So to show a man even your shin and silk stockings above the shin would have been seen as scandalous. So again, that shows the extent to which Nora is moving away from expected marital customs of the time. At this time, night is also falling, so we could say that there's some pathetic fallacy here. Of course, if you have darkness, you have candles, and therefore candlelight can be seen as resulting in some kind of intimacy between these two characters, almost framing this kind of dialogue. But it also could show something ominous on the horizon. Of course, that is the end of Halma and Nora's marriage. So the darkness could also hint at something which is to come, for example, in Act 3. Again, we've got the letter, and this is, of course, the letter that Krogstad has left, in which he tells Halma everything that Nora has done regarding forgery of the loan. And again, the letter, therefore, is a symbol of truth, but that letter is also a catalyst for Nora's anagnoresis, or epiphany, which is her decision to leave and reject her marriage and also the home, essentially. Nora cannot get to the letter because the letterbox is locked, and of course Halma has the key. So keys here are symbolic of power, and it heightens the sense of tension because she can see the letter but she just cannot reach it, and that kind of makes it worse. And Mrs. Lind, or Mrs. Linde, as kind of this confidant character, she says that I will help you, Nora. I will go to Krogstad and use my womanly persuasion to get him to get the letter back for you, and I'll come back as quickly as I can. Of course, in the end, once she has manipulated Krogstad to the point of getting the letter back, and he's willing to do so in Act 3, she changes her mind and says, no, leave the letter there, because the Halmas need openness in their marriage. And of course, Mrs. Lind finishes the play in a much better position, arguably, than Nora, because Nora is now ostracised and out in the cold, whereas Mrs. Lind now has a relationship with Krogstad, and that's, of course, began the opposite way. It was Mrs. Lind who was out in the cold in the beginning. So Mrs. Lind says she's going to help, but she actually says honesty might be better, and maybe Mrs. Lind helps. Maybe she does help. Maybe Nora is better off leaving the home, and if this letter wasn't there, she would have been stuck in this oppressive marriage forever. I mean, she's already wasted 8 years of her life in this marriage, playing this role of this doll-like wife. Maybe Mrs. Lind helps her to achieve her independence at the end. And the final part of the act I just want to focus in more detail is some stage directions, actually, which is at the Tarantella dance, the rehearsal. Of course, Nora now really has gone past the point of being saved. She's resigned herself to believing that her marriage is in effect over as soon as Halma reads the letter in the letterbox, and of course she might still be contemplating suicide here. So again, this dance shows Nora performing a role to be watched like a doll. She dresses up like a doll, she is performing a role, she's following instructions, the dance routine from Halma. And this dance really offers her escapism from the seriousness of what's going to happen in the next act. So the adverbs increasingly wildly shows that she's attempting to resist against the reality of what's going on within this dance routine, and she's rebelling against the rules and the dance routine that Halma has taught. She's ignoring corrections, which again is shows her trying to reclaim that freedom. And her hair also begins to come down and falls over her shoulders, which metaphorically shows a character that is transforming from a woman with a very clear societal role as a wife and mother to a woman who becomes independent and emancipates herself democratically from the house at the end. So again, that hair shows that this is a character in transition in terms of a societal role. So just 4 pieces of Act 2 in terms of key quotes there. The idea being that you might want to refer to some of these in the exam, in your essay, if of course they are relevant to the question that you are set. So thanks for watching and good luck in your studies. Thank you.